didn't get off that bus, then where the hell did he go? A redaction from reality. Some disappearances leave behind nothing but silence. No screams, no struggle, no footprints in the snow, no tire marks in the dirt, just a vanishing point. In November of 1949, a World War I veteran named James Tedford boarded a Greyhound bus in northern Vermont. He was quiet, slumped in the rear seat, a man nearing the end of his life. 8 hours later, when the bus arrived in Bennington, he was gone. Gone without a trace. No one saw him leave. No one even saw him move. But his suitcase remained. His bus ticket was punched. His coat was still draped over the back of his seat. This wasn't a man lost in the wilderness. He vanished inside a moving bus. This is episode 4 of the Bennington Triangle, and this is where things start to get truly impossible. Before we talk about the vanishing, we need to talk about the man who vanished. James Edward Tedford. Tongue twister, I know, if you're trying to say it fast. Sometimes spelled Tefford with no D. In old news articles, was born in 1884. He was a quiet New Englander, raised in Vermont, and came of age during a time of war and upheaval. Not much is known about his early life, but we do know that he enlisted to fight in World War I. He served with the U.S. Army, and while exact service records are spotty, it's believed he spent time in France during the tail end of the war, an experience that would leave a mark. After his discharge in 1919, James returned home with more silence than stories. According to surviving family members, he was, quote, the kind of man who stared out the window for hours, end quote. A loner, a man of habit, possibly suffering from what we now recognize as PTSD, then called shell shock. He eventually married a woman named Pearl, and the couple settled in Franklin County, Vermont, about 30 miles from the Canadian border. They didn't have children. They lived in a modest farmhouse with a dog and a few chickens. Life, by all outward appearances, was uneventful until Pearl vanished. In 1940, Pearl Tedford left her home to run errands in town. She was seen at a general store around 10:30 a.m. The shopkeeper said she bought flour, tobacco, and a small jar of jam. She never made it home. Her disappearance sparked a small local search. Neighbors combed nearby fields and back roads. James filed a missing persons report, and deputies asked about the state of the marriage. James reportedly said, quote, she was tired, worn down. I don't think she meant to run. But no note was found. No suitcase missing. She had not packed. She had not called. She simply vanished. The case went cold in less than 2 weeks, and James, already a quieter man, grew quieter still. Some of Pearl's relatives believed James knew more than he was saying, but there was no evidence of foul play, and no body was ever found. Years passed. James sold the farm and moved into the Bennington Soldiers' Home, a state-run facility that housed aging veterans. He was 65 years old and mostly kept to himself. Some described him as lucid. Others said he talked to someone who wasn't there. He made routine trips to visit nieces in St. Albans, a family thread he hadn't let go of. And that's what brought him to the bus in November of 1949. The St. Albans to Bennington route was about 140 miles, heading south through Vermont's rural backbone. Greyhound buses at the time followed a predictable path. No GPS, no radios, just scheduled stops and old-fashioned paper tickets. The route passed through Montpelier, I think I'm saying that right, Randolph, White River Junction, Bellows Falls, and Bennington. Total trip time around 7.5 to 8 hours, depending on weather. James was known to take this route at least twice a year. He would board the bus, sit in the back, and rarely speak a word. His relatives in St. Albans said goodbye to him on the morning of November 12th, gave him a packed lunch, and watched him disappear into the fog with a small suitcase and overcoat. He boarded the bus at 9:35 a.m. It would be the last time anyone saw him. The Greyhound bus James boarded wasn't empty. There were a dozen other passengers scattered throughout. Farmers, a traveling salesman, a college student heading home for break. Witnesses later reported that James sat near the back. He dozed for most of the ride, his suitcase above his head, his coat folded neatly in his lap. At multiple stops, people saw him. One man said he looked dead asleep, like he hadn't slept in days. Another passenger, Ms. Helen Stone, claimed, quote, "I remember him because he had that old war coat, and it smelled like cedar. He was there before White River Junction, but when he got to Bennington, I never saw him leave." That would become a common thread. Everyone remembered him on the bus. No one remembered him getting off. When the bus arrived at Bennington Terminal, a porter stepped aboard to help passengers disembark. He found an empty seat where James had been. But his coat was still there, his suitcase still overhead, his punched bus ticket tucked into his coat pocket. The porter assumed James had already exited, but after unloading the luggage, the truth settled in like fog. James Tedford had vanished from the bus. At first, no one panicked. It wasn't until the soldiers' home reported that Tedford never arrived that alarm bells went off. The bus company was contacted, and so were the state police. An internal investigation by Greyhound revealed the following. No unauthorized stops were made on the route. No emergency exits were triggered. No driver incident reports were filed. The seat that Tedford was sitting in was confirmed warm upon arrival. Warm. It's like somebody put their cheek to it and go, "Oh yeah, he was here." An officer from the Bennington Police Department wrote, "All possessions accounted for. No one saw him depart. No signs of struggle. Witness affirm he was present minutes before arrival. No explanation offered." The official stance: disappearance without observable cause. Unofficially, people started talking. In the weeks that followed, the town buzzed with speculation. Theory 1 is maybe Tedford had a heart attack or a seizure, slumped over, and somehow exited the bus in a confused state at one of the other earlier stops. Problems with this theory: his belongings were untouched. No one saw him leave. The bus made only scheduled stops with boarding checks, and Tedford would have had to slip off unnoticed in full view of others. And to do that on a bus, that's really hard, dude. That's really hard. You're not getting off of a bus without being seen. Theory 2. Some proposed that James might have taken his own life, opening a door or window and jumping. But the bus was sealed, Emergency exits were locked, nobody was ever found along the route, and he was in good spirits that morning, according to his niece. Theory 3: could someone have harmed him on the bus, staged a removal? Unlikely. The bus was crowded, no struggle, no blood, no screams. Just like every disappearance before this. And why? James had no money, no known enemies, and that left one final theory: the triangle. To understand just how strange this disappearance is, we need to break down the physical environment. The 1949 Greyhound models used at rural New England routes were built like tanks. Narrow aisles, high-backed seats, small windows that barely opened, no walkways between cars, no trap doors, no undercarriage compartments accessible from the inside. Security at the time was low, sure, but logistics matter. Let's say James wanted to slip away unseen. Here's what he'd have to do: rise quietly without alerting the 5 passengers seated behind him, step past rows of people without being seen, exit the sealed rear door, emergency use only, do so without the driver or any passengers noticing, and somehow not be seen walking away by anyone outside at any stop. Witnesses say no one used the rear exits. The driver saw nothing unusual, and again, his coat and luggage were still on board. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was a straight-up deletion, a redaction from reality. The man who cleaned the bus that night was Ralph Buddy Menard, a night porter at the Bennington terminal. According to a 1953 interview in the Bennington Banner, he said, quote, "I remember the Tedford case like it was yesterday. Driver said he never left the bus. Other folks said he was sitting right there. But when I stepped in, his coat was laid over the back like he'd just gone to the restroom or something. I thought maybe he just wandered off. But his name was still on the baggage list. Luggage matched. Nobody ever came back." Menard would later call it the creepiest shift I ever worked. When asked if he believed Tedford had disappeared on the bus, Menard reportedly nodded and said, quote, "If he didn't get off that bus, then where the hell did he go?" The passenger statements gathered by local police presented more contradictions than clarity. One woman claimed Tedford was asleep at White River Junction. A college student said he didn't remember anyone matching Tedford's description at all, which he probably just wasn't paying attention to anybody on the bus. And they didn't have cell phones back then, so you can't sit there and be like, oh, he had his face buried in his phone. No. A salesman claimed the old man was reading a Bible and never spoke. One man swore Tedford got off in Bellows Falls, but police confirmed no disembarkment was logged there. There was no consensus. People remembered pieces of him, but nothing whole. Like the idea of James Tedford was blurred over time. Like memory itself was dissolving. And that's when whispers of something deeper started. Tedford's surviving family filed a missing persons report immediately. The soldier's home held his room for over a month in case he wandered in. His niece, Grace, told the Burlington Free Press in 1950, quote, "Uncle James was quiet but not confused. He knew his way around. He would never just vanish." When asked if she believed something supernatural occurred, she hesitated and said, "I don't know what to believe. All I know is we never saw him again." Some family members refused to speak on record, fearing ridicule. But in letters later obtained by local historian Marla Hoskins, a cousin wrote, quote, "Pearl was taken first, then James, our family won't step foot near Glastonbury anymore. The implication being whatever took them wasn't random. James Tedford's case made regional headlines, but never went national. Most papers treated it as an elderly man missing case with a hint of local weirdness. But some, like the Rutland Herald, leaned into the mystery. Veteran vanishes without a trace. A ghostwriter in the Bennington fog. Books like Joseph Citro's Passing Strange and Weird New England would later include the case as one of the most unexplainable disappearances in American history. Tedford's story also inspired short fiction, online mystery blogs, and even paranormal podcasts, many of which inaccurately state he was, quote, alone on the bus. He wasn't. He was surrounded by people and still disappeared. And I can actually attest to that because in my brain, they were walking around and somebody was looking at him, and mid-step, he disappeared. And then I got clarification here that it was just on the bus. He went poof and he was gone. So, misinterpretation happens. No body was ever recovered. Pretty common thing in these cases. No wallet, coat, hat, or cane ever turned up. No sightings were confirmed. In 1955, James Tedford was declared legally dead. His estate, what little there was divided among surviving relatives. His VA pension ceased, but his legend only grew. Bus drivers on the Bennington line began telling rookies to watch seat 13. Some said they saw fog gather inside the cabin, around Glastonbury Hollow. Others claimed an old man with hollow eyes sometimes appeared in the rearview mirror and then vanished. Just stories? Or something more? Over the decades, the story of James Tedford transformed from a cold case into local folklore. In the old Bennington bus terminal, now a parking lot, workers once claimed to hear the shuffle of footsteps late at night. A security guard in the 1970s wrote in his log, "Smelled old pipe smoke by the rear gate. No one was there. It reminded me of my granddad's tobacco." The old Greyhound line that ran from St. Albans to Bennington was retired in the 1980s, but for years before that, passengers reported strange encounters, like a chill in the air around seat 13, a man who boarded with no ticket and vanished mid-trip, an old war veteran asking directions to a town that no longer had a stop. Locals dubbed him the ghost on the route. And one chilling detail still circulates among bus drivers who've worked the region. On foggy nights, the fare box sometimes registers an extra ticket, but no one is there. Oh, chills, dude. I got the goosebumps. All up the arm, man. All up the arm. Goosies. Let's be clear. We still don't know what happened. There's no proof of foul play, no signs of dementia or mental break, and no logistical explanation that fits without gaping holes. Gaping holes. So what happened to James Tedford? Was it a medical emergency no one noticed? A tragic mistake? A quiet exit planned in advance? Or something stranger? In a place like Bennington Triangle, even the most rational answers feel inadequate, because rationality doesn't usually sit next to you on a bus, then vanish when you blink. James Tedford, born 1884, veteran of World War I, thank you for your service, sir, widower of a missing woman, last seen November 12th, 1949. And perhaps Like the others swallowed by the Bennington Triangle, he became part of something older, deeper, and far more unknowable than anything we can explain. If you made it this far and liked what you saw, like, subscribe. We've got another episode coming up. This has been episode 4, The Vanishing Veteran. Episode 5, we take a younger victim from the Bennington Triangle, and the pattern continues. So, as always, sources are in the description and are coming up after this. And thank you for watching.